All right, we'll call the committee meeting to order, and 9 o'clock, so SB 92 FN is the first one on. I, being the prime sponsor, will turn the egg over to my vice chair at this time.
Chair recognizes Senator Gray, prime sponsor.
Okay, thank you. This introduced the Register of Probate bill that was put forward this time. Certainly, we all know the history of those who listen to this recording. I want to make sure that, we've had a couple of Register of Probate bills in the past. They've been much more expansive than what is this time. But we also had the constitutional amendment, which passed the House and the Senate last year, but failed in the general election by about 3 or 4 percentage points. This bill tries to go back and correct some of the things that I believe is wrong with the current system. Right now, from the telephone information that we received from the court system last year, there is approximately, and to the best of my memory, about 7 calls for each one of the bills, or each one of the probate filings. So part of that, I'm told by some of those, is that they get different people each time. This, again, trying to use that Register of Probate as a point of contact that they can go in. During the development of this bill, we also found out about the court navigator, which are volunteer positions, and I incorporated that into here. And in case we get a Register of Probate who doesn't want to participate and doesn't want to join the navigator system, certainly that the position can be declared vacant and either filled by the process that's out there for filling those kind of positions. And with that, I'll take any questions the committee has.
Seeing none?
We'll see if anyone signed up. I believe probably 2 people.
He has the
Oh, he's got the sheet.
I got the sign-in sheet. It's
the egg on the sheet.
All right.
Chair calls Mr. Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senators. My name is Richard Head. I'm the Government Affairs Coordinator for the Judicial Branch. While we are opposed to expanding the roles of registers of probate, we do greatly appreciate the effort that Senator Gray put into this bill to not be as expansive as it has been in prior years. Without going into tremendous detail, registers of probate have obviously been around since 1600s, I believe. In 1984, we changed our court system dramatically into a unified court system, but we still had local courts. We had probate courts, we had district courts, and we had the family court. In 2011, the legislature eliminated those 3 courts, the probate court, the family court, and the district court, consolidated them as divisions of the circuit court, and we now have a circuit court clerk in each of the circuit courts. We no longer have this role for registers of probate. So prior to 2011, essentially the registers of probate were acting as the clerks of the probate courts. In 2011, with the consolidation of those 3 local courts into the circuit court, and they simply became divisions of the circuit court, that role for register of probate no longer existed, and the legislature, at the same time that the circuit court was created, essentially eliminated the roles of registers of probate. They were no longer had any role or function in this new court system. And that's been true with some minor tweaking since 2011. So we have clerks of the court, and they oversee the 3 divisions of the court. So not only in 2011 did the legislature eliminate the roles of registers of probate, but as Senator Gray said, last year there was a constitutional amendment to eliminate them that received 63% of the vote. for elimination, not quite enough for the 2/3, by about 3% short, but still a significant message that there is no desire to expand the roles of registers of probate. The other aspect of probate division in circuit court is it is now an electronic, largely centralized process. Virtually everything happens in Concord. Unlike the pre-1984 days and even pre-2011, where everything was done at the local court in paper throughout the state, everything is filed now electronically. We have a system in the electronic filing, unlike our Superior Court, where it's a guided question and answer process. And at the end of that question answer process, the ultimate final document is created through the system. It is much more user friendly, but we don't disagree with Senator Gray in the sense that we want to make sure that we are providing service to those who are trying to access our probate division. So as Senator Gray said, we have recently started up a navigator within the probate system. And the navigator is there to provide tools to help participants in the process. And when the navigator came on board, she also identified a volunteer program, or started to create a volunteer program. That program does not technically exist yet. We have not actually kicked it off. That's the Navigator Volunteer Program that's referenced in this bill. And the goal is to have a volunteer group, similar, I used to be the chief of consumer protection at the Department of Justice. And we used volunteers in the Department of Justice to help us in consumer protection answer constituent issues, to mediate cases, and to really provide additional resources for citizens. And I think this has a very similar role. It will provide a mechanism for us to provide training to those who want to become volunteers in this system, and then have them help one-on-one with constituents in the communities. To ensure that they, can get whatever assistance they need that they can't get from the helpline. What we have concerns with in this bill is the bill sort of takes that volunteer program and puts a duty on the courts to decide whether or not we are going to certify or decertify these registers of probate. And if we decertify, they are potentially going to lose their jobs as registers of probate. And that ultimately the county commissioners would be saying, well, the court has decertified. Truthfully don't know what that means and what the standards would be, what the appeal rights might be, what ultimately the rights of a register of probate are going to be if we ultimately decide that a person who is participating should be, quote unquote, decertified. We do, however, strongly encourage anyone who is a registrar of probate to become a volunteer. There's absolutely no reason why they cannot become volunteers and participate as volunteers, much as we would encourage any senator, any representative, anyone in the state who has an interest, a passion for probate, for helping people to become a volunteer within our Volunteer Navigator program. But what we've become concerned with is expanding the role and sort of tying it to registers of probate, which doesn't have a necessary tie, and where registers of probate really have no functional role in our existing court structure for probate division of circuit court. So while we greatly appreciate the effort that went into this bill, the reality is there's nothing that would stop registers of probate or anyone else from participating in our Navigator volunteer program once it is up and running, which it should be later on this year. But we do not think it should be tied to the employment of a register of probate, to having those register of probate positions be deemed vacant and having new elections. It seems like an unnecessary step in terms of our desire to have this robust volunteer program of volunteer navigators. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding this bill. Thank you.
Any questions? Senator Susie.
Just to clarify, so the issue in, let's see, it looks like line 11 about the decertification is the primary concern, the decertification and then replacement by county commissioners?
I think,
Because there aren't standards for decertification?
they're not standards, and we're tying it to being a register of probate when our program is designed to be tied to being a volunteer.
Okay.
And we're now creating this sort of a separate register of probate system that is really not why we created this volunteer program.
Senator Gray.
Even with the volunteers, if there's someone that's not working out, I'm sure that you take them off the list or whatever. What is your vision of what these volunteers, someone who is not working out, what is your vision of what you do with them, whether they're registered as a probate or not?
So a fair question. As I said, we're still building the program. My assumption is they would, and again, this is an assumption at this stage, they would be signing a volunteer agreement with the judicial branch. And under that agreement, we would have the right to say, you're no longer participating. But also, we're not tying that to any other job. It's, it's not like they're going to lose some other employment by virtue of how they work out as volunteers within our program. We want people to be in it. We want people to want to be in it. And historically, what we have seen with registers of probate is a wide range of people who become registers of probate. Some are very good. Some have no particular interest in it. And since 2011, that's become even more certain or more of a problem.
Certainly, the sponsor of the bill is willing to work with you and hold off executing this bill to see if they can get to be common ground and take care of your problems.
We're always happy to talk, Senator, and I appreciate that. I think what we would look to is an encouragement of all registers of probate to become volunteer navigators, not have the beginning. So the other part of this bill, actually, I forgot about, says you can't even get sworn in until you've gone through the training of the navigator program, which is, again, it doesn't actually exist yet, but we're tying it to all ends of a register's of probate's employment as a register, and then can have them decertified, and then that county then apparently has to do a new election if the county commissioners so decide.
I'll look it up again, but I believe that in certain positions that the county commissioners actually appoint replacements for some of those positions.
Oh,
And
that's
if
right.
If it doesn't
I might be wrong
say
about
that, we can make the bill do, so that it does say that.
Okay, and I might be wrong about the election. I apologize if I am.
All right. Is there anybody on the signed in since? Okay. And anyone in the public that didn't sign up that feels an urgent need to talk? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing and yeah, but we still have a couple of open ones, so. All right. Second bill is the Senate Bill 70. Since I'm the prime sponsor, I don't know whether you want to be the acting chair or whether Senator Susie does, but one of you probably should be. Here. All right, here we go. All right, we'll pass the egg. And if the public will allow, I'm going to testify from up here on the introduction of the bill.
Morning. We'll now open the public hearing on Senate Bill 70. And this time, we'll recognize Senator Gray to introduce the bill.
Okay, thank you. For the record, my name is James Gray. I represent Senate District 6, which starts up in Belknap County and goes down in Stratford County. I personally live in Rochester. This bill here, we've had on the docket a couple of times here in the past couple of years, relative to establishment of an election information portal. Last time, the thing that happened in the House was they looked at the price tag and they took a big, deep breath and said no. So what we've done here is we've made it apparent that this is not a way to verify somebody's identity and complete the whole process. What it is a way to get the information into the system such that hopefully, in my vision, that ElectionNet will be engaged, and through ElectionNet, that change of registration or request to be registered or whatever will go to the appropriate clerk and supervisor of the checklist, and they will take care of the process just as if someone sent them an email or other communications via the phone or whatever. But certainly in the future, you know, what I would like to see is somebody standing in line to register at the polling place, you know, have an app on their phone and they start typing the information in. When they finally get up to the front, they says, oh, my number is 123456, and the clerk says, oh, yep, we've got all the information we need. Show me your license, show me your other proof. They sign the form and they will walk over and get their ballot. But again, we're not there yet. So this bill here, limited in scope, is only going to do, and if you look at the fiscal note, we do talk about doing the programming, and also I think that this is the one, the secretary, correct me if I'm wrong, says they would need 2 people ongoing to administer all the things that are going on. Certainly, I can think of a lot of things those people could do, and not just this. It might help me out in another bill that's coming up that has a larger fiscal note than I want. So it's not a whole lot of new stuff in there. The bill isn't very long. You know, especially on election day, on the general election, you know, I try to encourage people who are Republicans or Democrats to understand what they are on the checklist, but that's to avoid the people who come in on primary day and want a Democratic ballot and they're told they're Republican or vice versa, which they get upset when. And now we would have a way to say, go into the portal, you know, submit your request, because you can't take those on election day. With that, I'll answer any questions the committee has.
Senator?
Just a quick one. Mr. Chairman, would you believe that I had intended to be a co-sponsor and had actually believed I had signed on to this legislation,
Absolutely.
despite the fact it's not printed on here? Thank you.
I see no further questions. Thank you, Senator. You're excused.
Okay.
At this time, we'll recognize Secretary of State David Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, and very pleased to be here in favor of Senator Gray's bill and Senator Soucy's in absentia. We are currently replacing the legacy voter database, registration database, commonly known as ElectionNet. We expect that project will be completed sometime this summer. The new database will allow a lot more functionality and really improve our ability to do what Senator Gray is proposing in this regard. And you know, so we're happy to move this forward, and I think that this is a system that will be able to grow with additional functionality as time goes on and we see the need arise. But we certainly think that we can do everything that's proposed in this bill without any difficulty. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Seeing no hands raised, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. At this time, I'll recognize, is it Ben Cotton? Beth, excuse me.
Good morning, Chairman Gray and members of Election Law. It's very nice to have this opportunity to speak to you today. I am here absolutely in support of SB 70. After last year, as Senator Gray alluded to, the price tag and unsuccessful passage of that, I did a little research, and I found a lot of very interesting data out there. Many states have implemented the voter information portal successfully. It provides this readily available resource for folks who either can't make it to their town offices, don't want to stand in line at the polls, have mobility issues, have transportation issues, and things like that, and they can update their information from home. A side benefit to this portal is that there's some significant relief for town officers and election officials in no longer needing to track down missing or erroneous information as they used to. It was estimated, they did a study, that there was a 4-year period of time that they looked at here in New Hampshire, and it took $10 million worth of resources to get that bad information and processing these paper forms. So at a $2.5 million annual cost, 477 sounds pretty darn good. The main goal today was to give you some data here. I have copies of a study specific to New Hampshire, and also a study that was outlining Maine's experience, and their cost was about $260,000 several years ago. So I have copies of all of that for you, and I also have cited a couple of studies from Pew and from ACLU in my testimony here that tells you a breadth of information regarding the topic. So I appreciate reintroduction of this measure and actively support it. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for your testimony. At this time, we'll recognize Mackenzie St. Germain.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, my name is Mackenzie St. Germain. I'm the campaign director for the New Hampshire Campaign for Voting Rights, which is a nonpartisan coalition of in-state and national groups working to advance voting rights and healthy democracy, which includes modernizing our elections in New Hampshire. And we are a project of America Votes New Hampshire. I'm here today in support of SB 70. Establishing this election information portal benefits both voters and our election officials. Many voters now are totally comfortable handling their billing, their banking, car registrations online, and this really just brings voting into that same line, having safe and secure ways to do this work on the internet. With the ease of also completing an application through the portal, as was mentioned, we can really reduce the long lines for registration on Election Day. Voters also being able to immediately update their information if they move to a new address can help keep our voter rolls even cleaner, which is another way to increase voter confidence, making sure that the information on our voter rolls is updated and clean. And it also will support our supervisors of the checklist and our election officials, as mentioned, making sure that they don't need to read handwriting. I know mine is not always the best, or rely on entering those handwritten forms, having that information already in a easily available online form. We're really excited to hear that the Secretary of State is now, when updating the ElectionNet system, it should be compatible with this. Over 40 states and Washington, D.C. are now utilizing online systems, so it's really time for New Hampshire to follow their lead and make sure that we have a system that works for New Hampshire and our elections, and can kind of use the best practices from other states to make a system that works for us. So we're definitely in support of this bill as a coalition, and want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
See no hands raised. Thank you for your testimony. This time, we'll recognize Olivia Zink.
Good morning, Chair and member of the committee. For the record, my name is Olivia Zink. I live in Franklin and is the Executive Director of Open Democracy Action, a nonpartisan nonprofit. And we are in support of Senate Bill 70. I really want to thank this committee for all of your hard work that you have done on this bill, especially Chair Gray, for modernizing the application process for new voter registration, requesting absentee ballots, changing your name, domicile, or party affiliation. This summer and fall, I spent many hours listening to voters and receiving emails, and many of them said we would increase confidence in our elections if we had such a system. This is a simple solution that would create a secure, modern, and accessible election, and it's an important first step in supporting our poll workers. I volunteer on election day, and one election, somebody came to check in, and their name was not on the list. And they said, well, I voted here before. I've registered at this polling location. We went over to the supervisors of the checklist table. We pulled out their registration paperwork, and the second letter of their last name had an O instead of an A when it was entered into the checklist. It was a simple, incorrect error that was made because the supervisor of the checklist couldn't read their handwriting. These problems could be solved by such a portal. This also will save our supervisors of the checklist, mostly our town and cities, some money. Estimate says it's about $4.72 in staff time per voter registration application that we could save. And saving money for local taxpayers is a win-win. You would be a hero. This system is affordable to set up. And I just had one idea of strengthening this is that in our election procedural manual, it says you have to have a wet signature, and I just think that clarifying that maybe in the procedure manual, and maybe that's something the Secretary of State could do without needing election changes. So please side with voters and support Senate Bill 70.
Senator Gray.
You said that was in the procedures manual. I don't remember it being in statute. If you find it is in statute, I'd like you to tell me where.
I don't think it is in statute. I believe it's just in the procedure manual, and I can pull out the pages, but I didn't bring the book with me today.
That's fine. Thank you.
See no hands raised. Thank you again for your testimony. Are there any members of the public who wish to testify in regards to Senate Bill 70 if they have not already? We'll ask you to sign in after, but just state your name for the record.
Oh, yes. So Louise Spencer, and I'm with the Kent Street Coalition. I wasn't going to speak, but I just really wanted to underscore that point about the handwriting. I spent a lot of hours going to supervisors of the checklist meetings, and I would say they spent many a late night in some towns trying to decipher signatures and also then trying to undo problems in the computer where things had been entered incorrectly. So I just offer that again in support of this bill, which is a very good one. And thank you, Senator Gray, for reintroducing it. Thank you.
I had trouble reading some of the handwriting on the list, so I can understand. Are there any members of the public who wish to testify and have not already? You may step forward. Just please state your name for the record. And make sure you sign the sheet after.
Already signed.
You're just changing from non-speaking to speaking?
No, I already signed for speaking.
I'm still having trouble reading the list, though. Sorry.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee and Senator Gray. My name is Joely, and I'm from Nashua, New Hampshire. And I'm here today to testify because I believe it is important that the New Hampshire State House Committee supports the SB 70 because it will facilitate voters' registration, the registration process. It will help to update any information or obtain any information regarding voting, such as location, election day, etc. I think it will make the election process more accessible, and voters of all ages will benefit, elderly as well as young people. Due to the lifestyle, some elderly people might not have someone to take them to the polls just to request an absentee ballot, or young people might have a hectic lifestyle. And by using this information portal, all the information will be available and more accessible. Which I think at the end is about allowing New Hampshire citizens to cast their votes and do what is a right as a citizen. And I believe in a post-pandemic world where most of the services that we are using today, from bills, medical appointments, school, we do everything virtually or online. So I don't see any reason why this bill could not pass due to safety reasons, because we do already use services like that. And I know there are like around 40 states, including DC, the district, Washington, that are using and allowing these kind of portals. And I think that New Hampshire shouldn't be the exception. And we should move forward with technology and advancement just to make election information available and accessible. Thank you so much for your time, and I urge you to support SB 70. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. See no hands raised. The witness is excused. Any members of the public who wish to testify in regards to Senate Bill 70 that have not already? Seeing none, at this time we can now close the public hearing on Senate Bill 70.
The other sign-in, oh, that's right, we passed it down for Ms. Spencer to sign in. Give me the high sign when you're ready.
We just started coming up like huge notice. So it was sort of like a 4-day patchwork of whatever. I was driving up here today. I'm like, not remarkably organized for what just happened. So, how are you currently doing? I'll tell you after.
Ready, Trish? We'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 73 and introduce the prime sponsor, Senator Rebecca Perkins-Coker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having me. I'm Senator Rebecca Perkins-Coker, for the record, from District 21, here to introduce SB 73, a bill relative to the Help America Vote Act HAVA grants. This bill would create a grant program for the state to distribute over $12 million in unused funds from the Help America Vote Act received back in 2002 to help towns and cities prepare for the impending 2024 elections. It also removes a restriction currently in statute to control the spending of such funds, which would be an impediment to such a grant program. The state currently possesses $12.8 million in unused HAVA funds from 2002, and I believe we need to make use of those funds to strengthen our elections. I have heard from municipalities across the state that the ballot counting devices they currently use are past their prime and often break down. LHS, the company that services the voting machines, has stated publicly that they can no longer guarantee parts for the AccuVote machine, and that the software the machines run is also out of date. In fact, the programming of the devices must be done on Windows XP, a product that can no longer even be purchased. As Secretary Scanlon has presented, the Ballot Law Commission has begun the process of choosing a new ballot counting device, And when it does, it will be critical for each and every community who uses a ballot counting device to have access to this newer model. Ultimately, using these HAVA funds so that cities and towns can secure these devices will improve election infrastructure in the state and help make sure our elections continue to run smoothly. I also have one change that's been suggested to the language of my bill from someone in Rockingham County, which is on page 1, line 16, to include the word accessible before technology, to include, make sure we're ensuring folks that need visual or oral assistance to make sure that the technology adopted would be available to them. At a time when our elections are erroneously questioned for fraud, we need to do everything we can to foster trust in our democratic institutions. Allocating long unused funds to purchase new equipment will do just that while preventing the burden from falling on municipalities and subsequently our taxpayers who are already struggling under high property taxes. This is an urgent matter with a clean solution. We must protect the bedrock of our democracy, free and fair elections. With that, I will take any questions from the committee.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. Secretary, did you want to go first, last? Where did you want to be? I'll give you your choice.
I'll go next if...
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, and I'm here in opposition to this bill today. And just a little history about the Help America Vote Act was Congress passed the act in 2002, and shortly thereafter they appropriated a significant amount of money to the states, and at the time New Hampshire's share was about $17 million. The requirements of the Help America Vote Act were that the states were to use that money to create a statewide centralized voter database, if they did not already have one, to provide accessible equipment for individuals with disabilities in every polling place, to provide poll worker training, voter education, and enforcement activities by the state Attorney General's office for enforcement of the Help America Vote Act provisions. At the time, the state met those requirements, created the centralized voter database, which went live in 2006, and provided an accessible voting opportunity in every polling place for individuals with disabilities. And the legislature decided to create the election fund and bank the principal amount which was left over, which at the time I believe was around $12 million, with the idea being that the state would move forward using the interest on those funds to fund the ongoing mandates of the Help America Vote Act. Currently, that money supports we call it the Help America Vote Act office, part of our elections division, housed in the state archives. There are 4 or 5 full-time employees stationed there, and they are working entirely on Help America Vote Act provisions. That includes, excuse me, extensive training for local election officials. It includes data quality in the centralized voter database, and things like that. Along with the full-time staff that we house in that facility, we also have to pay vendors who maintain and support the software code in the database system for both the election database, but also the software that is used for the accessible voting equipment. We are, as I mentioned earlier, on another bill, replacing our legacy voter database system with a brand new system. We are on our at least our third generation of accessible voting equipment in the polling place. Right now, a voter can go in and use a tablet to make their choice for who they want to vote for on a ballot. An actual ballot is placed in a printer, and when the voter is finished, the ballot moves through the printer. Their choices are marked in the oval on the ballot so that they can proceed to vote just independently and privately like any other voter in the polling place. And when they're done, the disabled voter can take their ballot and run it through the AccuVote machine and have their vote counted just like everyone else. And last year, with these funds, we also created an opportunity for individuals with sight disabilities to be able to receive their ballot electronically, vote on the ballot using their computer, print off their ballot, and then they were able to mail it back in a manner similar to the way UOCAVA voters vote, military and overseas, except that they had the option of actually using software to mark their ballot on the printer to mail it back in. Currently, it's a local decision whether a town wants to count their ballots using an electronic ballot counting device. A little more than half the towns use an optical scan counting device, the AccuVote machine, and the balance are primarily smaller towns that still hand count their ballots, and it's probably cost effective for them to do it that way, given the cost of the equipment. As you heard, we are rigorously testing potential alternatives to the AccuVote device. We have 4 companies with a ballot counting product that are interested in the New Hampshire market, and so we tested an open source software system called Voting Works in the last general election in 2022. In the upcoming local elections, we're going to be testing devices manufactured by Dominion and ES&S. Dominion will be tested in Milford and Londonderry, and the ES&S device will be tested in Winchester. And then there's a 4th company, Clear Ballot, which is looking for a town that will sponsor them as a trial. I would expect that these tests will continue through the town meetings again next year. So any special elections, not including the one that's coming up in Rochester, the city elections this fall, we'll all be testing opportunities for those devices, and the Ballot Law Commission will hopefully make a choice sometime next year on the next alternative. So the point I'm trying to make here is that I believe that the HAVA funds that we have are being responsibly managed. The money is being spent in a productive way. And I think New Hampshire should be proud of the way that we have done that. If we spend the principal down, then we are going to have to go to the general fund every biennium for at least $1 million a year just to maintain the federal mandates of the Help America Vote Act. And that is at a time when there is a lot of legislation that you are taking up that will change the way we conduct elections in New Hampshire, all with costs associated with them, whether it is paying for postage on absentee ballots or whether it is, conducting rigorous audits after the election is over, and the many other proposals that are out there all have a cost, and we're going to have to go to the general fund to pay for those new activities. The election fund, the way it's constructed, adds stability to being able to maintain the Help America Vote Act mandate. Mr. Chairman, I will stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none,
Thank you.
thank you. All right. Mackenzie St. Germain.
Members of the committee, my name is Mackenzie St. Germain. I'm with the New Hampshire Campaign for Voting Rights, which is a project of America Votes New Hampshire, and I'm here in support of SB 73 today. This legislation is really crucial to our towns, our election officials, and our overall election infrastructure, as it is really crucial that as soon as possible, once we have machines approved, we replace our ballot counting devices. These current ballot counting devices that New Hampshire towns and cities use, if they choose to, are the AccuVote machines, which were introduced in 1989. They're no longer available for sale. The parts are no longer manufactured. As Senator Perkins-Quokka noted, they use Windows XP, which is an operating system that is no longer supported by Microsoft. And in a July 2022 Keene Sentinel article, Ballot Law Commission Chair Brad Cook was quoted as saying, LHS, who's the servicer of the machines, will no longer be supporting them beyond the 2024 election. So we're really looking at town meeting day 2025, city elections 2025, as the timeline for when towns are going to need new ballot counting devices or face the option of hand counting, which in many of our larger towns is really not a sustainable way to go. Although the machines we currently use are functioning and accurate, they're really running on borrowed time. If these devices need parts that aren't available from other machines, if they have software issues, we are going to be faced with hand counting our ballots, which adds a lot of stress to our election officials. It puts at risk timely election results the same night election results that Granite Staters have come to expect and should expect. Ballot Law Commission is currently working on certifying new devices, but they have not been approved yet. So if we're looking at devices maybe certified the end of this year or early 2025, the timeline on getting those new devices, early 2024, apologize, the timeline on towns getting the funding for those new devices in their budgets is really small. It's really short to maybe get a device approved early next year and ask on town meeting day for that funding for those new devices to be approved or be left without a functioning machine because towns are responsible for funding the purchase of those machines through their own budgets. The Secretary of State has said that and shared to this committee that we have $12.8 million in Help America Vote Act funds, and we spend about $1 million a year. Nothing in this bill says we have to spend that fund all the way down to zero, but using some of those funds, the $12.8 million in funds, to support our towns who otherwise are going to be funding these machines out of their very small budgets is a fiscally responsible decision, and one that supports both our towns and our election infrastructure statewide. And one of the specifically mentioned uses for funds in the Help America Vote Act is replacing and updating voting systems. So using a portion of these funds makes sure that we are supporting our election officials who are the backbone of our New Hampshire elections and supporting the infrastructure that helps us have some of the best elections in the country and have those run smoothly. Finally, I do want to mention that this legislation meets two of the recommendations that were made in the Special Committee on Voter Confidence report. One was acknowledging that we do need to replace our ballot counting devices, that they work, but they are well past their kind of time. And the other specifically was to utilize state and federal funds to implement the report's recommendations and enable local communities to have the resources to conduct elections. So that is very much in line with this bill, and I think should be taken seriously that the committee made that recommendation. So thank you for your time, and I am also happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Olivia Zink.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Olivia Zink. And actually today I have testimony from Judith Ackerson, who's the supervisor of the checklist in Franklin, Ward 3. And I'm just going to summarize Judith's story. Judith was elected to be the supervisor of the checklist, and she learned that her laptop, her personal laptop, was needed to enter in the data. And she tried to no avail, calling the HAVA office, calling other offices, trying to get her laptop to work with the ElectionNet system. It ultimately didn't work. Dan Darling, who's the other supervisor of the checklist, had an old laptop, not his current laptop, but an old laptop that was compatible for them to enter the data. I think it's really important that there is funding available for local communities to get a laptop for the supervisors of the checklist to do their data enter need that's dedicated. And if it's, maybe it's a subsection of the cybersecurity funds where towns are able to access money, because I don't think we should be relying on all of the volunteer personal laptops for supervisors of the checklist to be able to do their job. And also, the
Just-
supervisors of the
Just a second.
checklist.
Secretary and Deputy Secretary, if you would do a little investigation on that and then just send the committee a note with your findings, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Go on, Libby.
So Judith just supports this bill and allowing a grant for technology to be used for secure laptops so that supervisors of the checklist can access ElectionNet or the new system that's in place. Thank you.
All right, questions? Seeing none, thank you, Olivia. All right. Louise Spencer.
Hi, thank you for taking my testimony. Louise Spencer with the Kent Street Coalition, and we strongly support this bill. The towns are tasked with running our elections, and that includes their local elections, but we also ask them to run our state and federal elections. And it's incumbent upon the state to provide resources that they need to do so. We heard from at the Secretary of State's commission this summer and last spring. I think there's a universal concern that we update the counting machines, the electronic counting machines. We need to find funding to do that, and it's not fair to ask the towns to bear that burden when in fact they are doing us all a favor by running the elections. So this seems like a very good and logical solution to the problem of updating those machines, which we know now we're operating on a deadline to do. These are monies that were set aside to do that, and I would hope that this committee would, in fact, see their way clear to releasing funds to the towns to do these sorts of updates that are necessary. So thank you very much.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you. And Matt Mushin? I'm probably butchered it, but. All right.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Gray, members of the committee. My name is Matt Mushian. I live in Claremont, where I serve as a city councilor. And today I'm here representing 603 Forward, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting and empowering the next generation of young leaders here in New Hampshire. Today I've come before you to support Senate Bill 73. As you've heard, our ballot counting machines in New Hampshire are aging. In a New Hampshire Public Radio article from December of last year, it was reported that starting in 2024, state officials said that the manufacturer of our machines will no longer be able to produce parts for that model. So the continued repair, maintenance, and the inevitable replacement of these machines is really a financial burden on municipalities across the state. With these machines not guaranteed to work after the 2024 elections, that means that the towns and cities who use them will need new ballot counting devices in the immediate future. And with budget seasons, as you've heard, that puts a tight timeline to us. And this certainly could have been avoided with earlier planning by the state, but I think it's really important that we take immediate action now, because for cities like Claremont, we do have a lot to budget for. The continued development and revitalization of our downtown, the maintenance of our roads and sidewalks, providing quality education to our students, and good benefits to our workers, just to name a few things. So as we look towards building our budget, we shouldn't have to worry about the financial strain of upgraded election equipment for our citizens to be able to participate in the bedrock of our democracy, which is a free and fair election. As you've also heard, the Secretary of State's office does have $12.8 million in Help America Vote Act funds, which could be used to purchase new machines, allowing our municipalities to upgrade their equipment without putting the strain on them. And Senate Bill 73 would create the mechanism for these grants to be awarded. I also think, to wrap up, that it is worth noting that the Secretary of State's Special Committee on Voter Confidence, as you heard, made a recommendation in their final report to use state and federal funds on election equipment for our election officials. So I think that this legislation will support and prioritize the recruitment of the next generation of election volunteers and workers in our state. And I think that this body should support the advancement of Senate Bill 73 to provide the resources for upgraded election equipment, and by doing so, help our election officials to run our elections safe and secure and smoother. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone who has changed their mind? All right. Margaret Burns has decided to go from a no to a yes.
I will be very brief. I'm Margaret Burns. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are in support of Senate Bill 73, of course, first and foremost, because it provides a grant funding opportunity to cities and towns to help them meet their obligation to run state elections as well as to run their own local elections. But we're also in support of this bill because we are hearing significant anxiety from local officials, particularly local election officials, about the fate of the machines, what the new machines will be, how much they'll cost, how they'll budget for them, and whether there will be any funds in support of meeting the obligation of new machines and upkeep of new machines. I know we've heard this morning that the decision to use ballot counting machines is a local decision. It's not a mandated decision by the state, but we would hate to see municipalities that have made that local decision and have found ballot counting machines to make them more efficient in running the election, as well as for the voters to not be able to meet that obligation because of obsolete machines. So for those reasons, we are in support of the bill. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
Is
you.
there anyone else? Hearing is closed. I'll take a motion to go into executive session. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second to go into executive session. Certainly going through the three bills, Senate Bill 70 looks like one that I think we can come to agreement on. It is something that passed the Senate last year, and I anticipate that with the lack of questions that we had, that or does anyone have anything they want to say here in executive session before we take a motion?
Could I ask one question? And this is just to everyone on the committee. And I'm not someone that thinks the 2020 election was stolen, so just let me preface that with this question. All right. I understand that you will be able to request the absentee ballot online. I understand the obvious benefits of that, but are there any safeguards in place regarding potential fraudulent requests?
Well, that's why it needs to go back to either the town clerk, city clerk, or the supervisor of the checklist. They are the ones who, in statute, are responsible for ensuring. Now, there is actually nothing in statute right now that prevents you from making a phone call to the clerk, from sending an email to the clerk, a text message if you know what they're, and starting that process right there. We're trying to make it more formal so that it is easier for people to understand, that you can put it up on the website, you can do all those things, and start the process maybe of moving a little bit further. If we want a system where it verifies you, like if you try to file your DP-10, that is the state income tax for interest and dividends for people who don't know, that system does more to verify who you are, social security number, other information. That's what was rejected by the House last year because of the cost that it would incur. This, again, right now, if you want an absentee ballot and you send an email to the clerk that says, I'm going to be out of town for the election on, I will be at this address, please, mail me the application and the stuff I need, that's perfectly acceptable right now. This just makes it easier for people to do. So we haven't changed the process. Senator.
I would just emphasize, it once again maintains that local control over the process of getting it out. So the locals, whatever process they currently employ, would continue to do so to verify that somebody is on the checklist and that they've.
And for anyone who were to attempt fraud, even if they think they got away with it, there is a clear digital trail of it, so justice would be able to serve itself. I'm just thought if there's any safeguards up front, but.
The same people who will be making the decision today under this bill will be making the decision when it's enacted. The clerk and the supervisor of the checklist in the community.
I understand that, but it's, when you go in person, if you go get your absentee ballot, request it, I mean, you're there in person, you can show an ID. I'm just saying, if you're doing it online, how are they verifying that the person requesting it is the actual person they say they are? I mean, I would request that, let's say, on behalf of my wife. I mean, I know all of her information. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be able to do that, but I'm just wondering, how would they verify that?
Again, there are those who would think that we would need to strengthen that. Right now, if you request an absentee ballot online, you are not required to provide an ID. Part of the reason for that was that the ease of being able to modify that ID if it's being either copied or photographed or whatever, that you wouldn't be able to detect that that was a modified record. Certainly, some of the Republicans, including myself, would like a stronger association with the DMV database. But right now, due to privacy concerns, especially with the amendment we did to the Constitution a few years ago, that is not something that is popular with enough of the legislators to make it happen. So, I mean, this really doesn't change that process. It doesn't make it stronger. It doesn't make it weaker. We can, in the future, put in additional legislation that would make it stronger, and some of the things like signing those affidavits from a bill we'll see later, where we're asking for other information that even someone who is homeless, may be able to provide us some information. Those kind of things I believe that we can do to make the process, but it's not in this bill.
Thank you. The other question I had is to complete a new voter application. Same questions with that. I just wonder what are the safeguards going into that?
Exactly the same as now. Exactly.
So if someone were to fill it out online, how would they verify that they're a resident here? I mean, if they don't have to show a license.
It goes to the clerk, it goes to the supervisor of the checklist, one of the two, either ones can really do it. And then they use the current process for verifying that.
So, Chair, are you saying, for example, in lines 17 and 18, these RSAs that, sort of govern the processing of that application or that request of absentee ballot are the same processes that occur if you were to walk into the clerk, for example, right now? Like, those RSAs will continue to provide
Right.
those assurances.
And
Yep.
again, as senators, we have differing opinions of whether those requirements, especially when I'm doing it via email or whatever, are strong enough. And those are valid questions. But this bill says that this portal is just another way you can send me that electronic transmission and get the process started.
It
So-
doesn't in any way weaken the process. It's not like creating a lesser standard, sorry.
I have a habit of looking at a law, and I always look at if I wanted to
Yep.
exploit this for bad motive, for whatever. I just kind of look at it, like, how would that work? And one of the concerns I have is, and I think overall the policy is good and it has good intentions, but I just look at it as anyone, anywhere in the country could technically fill this out.
Absolutely.
And with the,
But they could fill out a paper form to, I mean, it's up to the clerks to.
They can send, right now, today, they can send in Rochester, an email that says, I want to vote in the special election that's going to be held the 21st of February. Right now. And the only thing we've done here is say, email's not the only way you can do it. A phone call will do it to start the process, because at that point, even in a phone call, you know, and with people retaining their old numbers now, you know, I often, because I sometimes let out-of-state numbers go to my voicemail, I get accused of not wanting to listen to my constituents because, you know, I maybe get a sequence of calls. But again, you know, what I'm trying to get you to do is to separate the two. You know, how do I verify someone that comes in by mail, and how do I do the other things? There are other states that run their voter lists through either Equifax or other companies' software to check name against age, against address, against whatever, to make sure the voter rolls are good. One of the things I've asked other people to is that if you want to help me, I says, give me a way that I can inexpensively, when a person walks in without any documentation at all on election day, that I can get some kind of verification they are who they say they are. But that's not this bill. It is something I'm working on outside of this. Anybody else? Do we have a motion?
Ought to pass?
Have a motion of ought to pass?
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Do I have a motion for consent?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of consent, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, unanimous. And, yeah, I'll take it out. Or maybe I should, since Senator Susie didn't get her name on the bill, if you would like to take it out, I'll let you take it out, and then you'll...
I don't mind.
All right,
doing that,
we'll
Mr.
give it to
Chairman. Thank
Senator
you.
Susie. All right, the first bill, I want to see if I can't get the judicial branch to come a little closer. Certainly, you know, their objection, they see, we have made progress in this. They now say that they are instituting this navigator program to help people probate, et cetera, which I can't understand why they would object to one of the requirements to being a register of probate be someone who is part of that program. That would give me somebody in every county, if people run for the office. If they don't run, I can't expect them to do it, but it would give me somebody in every county that would be part of their program. And whether you disqualify or whatever, that's what they're doing with their volunteers, is they're going to have a process of saying, thank you for volunteering, but you're just not good enough to be a navigator, okay? And that's said a little harsher than what they're going to say. And so, anyone else that wants to talk on that, but I'm not going to exec that today unless I get outvoted by you guys. Okay. The last one that we just heard, Senator Perkins Coca Bill 73. Certainly, there's an ongoing discussion of what to do with those HAVA money. Certainly, I have been of the opinion that I believe that the Secretary of State is doing a good job with the HAVA money, and that retaining that HAVA money allows him to have for elections, or that rainy day money, you know, that he can go out and react to the changes in the accessible voting machines, because we have gone through 3 iterations of those right now. And I also have a problem with getting the state into a situation where we're the ones that are purchasing those voting machines, either through grants or through other things. I think that the voting machines, yes, you know, I've bugged them for years over in the Secretary of State's office, you know, to authorize new machines. But with the new machines, I get more additional problems. Certainly in the old machines, we have cut all of the cables to the COM ports, okay? We do not have a Wi-Fi. We do not have a whole bunch of other things, which those things are going to be introduced back into the system, but that's not our purview. The Ballot Law Commission is the one who is either going to authorize the machines or not. Certainly, I would like to see the machines that we do finally authorize as approved by EAC, right? And down in Washington, that's the election, I think it's Assistance Commission. Don't quote me if I'm wrong, you can correct me. But along with new machines need to have an audit program because if you go back 5 years, when they did a review of New Hampshire, they said the 2 biggest problems in New Hampshire is our machines aren't certified by EAC, and we don't have an after-election audit, okay? And I know Senator Susie has to leave, but
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I did have a question for the Secretary of State, but I didn't think of it until after he testified. If I could just have a chance to go back to him, because I'm curious.
Absolutely.
He spoke of the initial appropriation of federal dollars. I just want to track if there have been additional dollars going into that fund.
there were, I think, 2 to 3, maybe even 4 million, 3 million that came in because of COVID. But I don't intend to do this one. I think that this,
Okay.
I think, you know, maybe Senator Perkins Coca and I can talk about this. And the important thing is having accurate elections, and I understand that. And Senator,
Just throw out one thought or question. So there's, if you look at the bottom lines, you know, 14 to 18, that's really a policy provision. So that policy could be separated from the Help America Vote Act funds too. So the extent, because it seems like some of the testimony was they supported the idea of having grants available for the local communities, but maybe the funding can come from somewhere else. That may satisfy all the worlds, at least most of them.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and I just wanted to say I appreciate the chair's comments, and I just want to remind you that this is not a request to take all of these funds, and I don't think anyone's suggesting that, you know, the Secretary of State wants to be requesting annual appropriations, but I think we do need to understand sort of, you know, what those actual annual appropriations would be. And I also will just say maybe there's another way to fund it, but the point about the logistics for our towns and cities is rather convincing to me. Like, we, you know, the Ballot Law Commission is going to approve new devices. They have to get that ask on town meeting, you know, and have the ballot machines in place in time for the election. So I do think there's sort of a unique, sort of tight time window here that we at the state should be supporting our towns and cities on. So I'll just, yeah.
And is that, maybe explains why there's no fiscal note? Maybe, or why they're having trouble figuring out what the fiscal note would be? I'm just speculating that,
Well,
without knowing the machine, it's hard to.
I suppose, I mean, you know, I think the ask is to create a grant program, so the Secretary's office would probably be in charge of determining what the right amount is for that grant program, but the estimate is around $3 million out of the 12.8.
and there are other people who would say that that money is going to, the money that we send back to cities and towns, because if I use the Harvard dollars now, I can't use them later for other things. So whether I take the money out of the general funds now or whether I take the money out of general funds later, if it is something I want to fund. But I may also, instead of doing this to help the cities and towns, I may want to, I don't know, maybe last year what we did was increase the return to the cities and towns from the room and meals tax. We may want to give them additional road and bridge. We may want to up the amount that we have for what a adequate education is. You know, again, there are multiple ways that we can return money to the cities and towns. I just think that this one here, in doing something that clearly the legislature since the 1990s, when these machines were first adopted, was a city and town expense. If you want to use them, these are the ones that are approved. Go for it. That there's other ways to do it, and that's just my opinion. And I'm only one of you five, of us five, I should say.
You.
Okay. Again, I don't think that we need to exec this today, but we will in the near future. Is there anyone else that has any comments for executive session?
Mr. Chairman, could we discuss Senate Bill 63?
Senate Bill 63, yes. And Senate Bill 63 is qualifying private community tax credits.
I'm going to move interim study on Senate Bill 63. If I could speak to that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to interim study Senate Bill 63. Your floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sympathetic to the constituents that came in last week and discussed this issue. I gave this one a lot of thought in the last week. The bill as it's written has a lot of issues. I don't think that it's practical or workable in its current format. I wish there were a way to make it so those people did not pay for services that they were not receiving. But you know, at the end of the day, the folks purchased property at a lower price, and they sort of benefited up front in the transaction. Creating a tax credit that I think no municipality would ever adopt is a poor precedent. So I think maybe we can look at it, improving the language over the next term, and maybe make some improvements.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak before I do?
And I believe this was well intended.
Oh, sure.
I think certainly, no one will disagree with that, but even by offering a tax credit, you're not necessarily reducing property taxes. You're kind of just shifting that burden to the other taxpayers. So it wouldn't necessarily result in the community-wide benefit that some may believe it will. I do sympathize with the people who are, as the Vice Chairman said, they're paying for a benefit that they're not receiving, but the majority of the people who are in that situation, when they purchased their property, knew what they were getting into, and that's one of the drawbacks of a situation of having a private road like that. So I won't be supporting this version of the bill.
Senator?
I guess, you know, this is a tough one. I could support interim study because I do see both sides of this. I see that these homeowners are paying twice for these costs, and yet at the end of the day, I think that most towns and cities adopt their tax credits or any other kind of sort of local property tax abatement based on very specific policies. For example, you know, being a veteran or, you know, being elderly, and so you know, it could be a local option. I was somewhat convinced by the technical issues that NHMA raised too, which is that, essentially the homeowners association would be bringing the amount of the credit as established in 1 year, but then it would sort of need to continuously be updated, and if there was more than one private community, I guess, there were sort of issues there. So maybe some study would benefit this, because I recognize this is not a small issue. I mean, I think someone mentioned 100 private roads just in Ringe alone. So anyway, those are my thoughts for what they add, Mr. Chair.
Senator?
And think of it this way, not getting a return on some of the money you're paying in taxes, well, people say that sometimes about public schools too. We don't have kids in the school
True.
system, and it's like,
True.
well, wait a minute.
True.
At one point you did, and it's a community-wide.
It's a community, right?
That precedent of that, which understand other contexts, could have some detrimental consequences.
Yep, I agree with that.
One of the things I get to do as chair of this committee is the chair is usually appointed to serve on the Assessing Standards Board, because the municipal officers, especially the selectmen, are often asked to settle disputes, shall we say. And what they told me is that this is built into the cost of the property, that if I have two identical homes on two streets, that if I have to pay a homeowner's fee, that the buyers take that into consideration, and so that the amount of money they offer for that house is different. Because my out-of-pocket expenses may be that I can only afford $2,500, but if my maintenance fee for my organization is $200 or even $500, that means that my mortgage and other payments have to be below the $2,000, where I can go all the way up to $2,500 on the other. So that's what the assessors are saying, and that they use actual sales when they do the calculation of property. And that if one neighborhood has a higher sales because of whatever, maybe it's a great school district in that side of town, but the other school district isn't, and those it affects the price. So they break these houses into various communities, and when they use comparable sales, they take those communities into account. Okay, so these people that come to me and they say, well, I'm paying the same taxes, okay? What the assessors are saying is you're not paying the same taxes. It may be reduced. You may be paying more taxes. Well, why? Well, maybe that community is right on the edge of a ski slope. Maybe that community is right on the edge of a lake, okay? Or overlooks, on the other side of the road, but overlooks the lake. There are a number of things that enter into that, and that the assessors say that what they're telling me is they take those factors into consideration by looking at the actual sales prices. And then you go back to one other thing, is that often the roads in these communities are not built to city standards, okay? That they may be narrower, they may not have the base in there, and that if we are starting to pay money based on their maintenance cost, how much of that is because they're not getting plowing and the others are, or is that maintenance because when they built the road in the beginning, that it didn't have that sufficient base or the sufficient undercoat, etc. So there's many, many, many factors. Unless somebody else wants to talk, we'll take the vote on interim study. All those in favor of interim study say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And we have a 4-0 vote to go to interim study. Anything else?
I make a motion.
Senator Murphy. He'll get to speak on the floor. Okay, anything else?
If I can do it for 400, I can do it for 400.
Do we have a motion to come out of executive session? So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor of coming out of executive session, say aye. Aye. And our business of the day being done, we are adjourned.